Welcome back, everybody. We're diving deep today into potential changes to the U.S. naturalization process, and we've got some pretty interesting insights from an immigration lawyer that could seriously impact anyone who is thinking about applying for U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, and you know what's really fascinating about this is we're not just talking about like these abstract legal theories,
Right.
but these are potential shifts that could have like real world consequences for individuals and families, you know?
Absolutely. And it's really important to remember that we're not here to take sides in any political debate, right? Like,
Right.
think of this as like informed speculation based on what we're hearing from this expert.
Exactly.
So whether you agree or disagree with the direction things may be heading, this is valuable information for anyone who's thinking, hey, maybe I want to apply for U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, precisely. The goal is to kind of give you the knowledge to navigate this complex and potentially changing landscape.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with something that I think a lot of people are already familiar with, the citizenship test.
Yeah.
It's almost a rite of passage, isn't it, for people who are seeking citizenship?
It is, yeah. The citizenship test is designed to assess an applicant's knowledge of U.S. civics, history, and government.
Uh-huh.
And it's a standardized exam, but there's been a lot of talk of potential changes.
Now, this is where it gets interesting because our source, the immigration lawyer, points out that these tests have been tweaked before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happened last time they tried to make them more challenging?
Right.
Did they start asking it like really obscure trivia from the 1800s?
Well, they did try to add more complex questions
Okay.
to kind of move beyond simple memorization, but those changes were met with a lot of legal challenges
Interesting.
and didn't stick around for very long. But this time around,
Okay.
the legal and political landscape might be different,
Uh-huh.
and these changes could be a little bit more permanent.
So let's say you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, okay, I need to brush up on my U.S. history.
Mm-hmm.
Should you be hitting the books, or is it still too early to tell what kind of questions they might add?
It's never a bad idea to brush up on your knowledge,
True.
but I think the specifics of any potential changes are still unknown.
Okay.
But what's important is to just kind of be aware that the test itself
Yeah.
could be a moving target,
Right.
which just adds another layer of uncertainty for applicants.
Oh, for sure. Uncertainty is definitely the theme here. And speaking of uncertainty, let's talk about processing times.
Okay.
I imagine this is where things start to feel very real for anyone who is actually going through this process.
Right.
How long are we talking about?
So right now, processing times for naturalization applications can be relatively fast, sometimes as quick as 4 to 6 months.
Wow, okay.
But our source is saying, based on past trends and potential policy shifts, those timelines could stretch out significantly.
Oh, no.
We could be looking at waits of a year or even longer.
Okay, so longer waits.
Yeah.
I can already hear the collective groan from our listeners.
I know.
What does this mean for someone who's thinking about applying right now? Should they rush to get their application in, or is that going to backfire?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So the source's advice is nuanced.
Okay.
If your application is squeaky clean,
Uh-huh.
no red flags, everything's in order, and you've done your due diligence, then yes, applying sooner rather than later
Okay.
might be wise.
So what do you mean by due diligence in this context?
Right. So it's more than just making sure all your forms are filled out correctly.
Okay.
It might involve things like filing a Freedom of Information Act request.
Okay.
That's a FOIA request
Right.
to obtain any government records relating to your immigration history.
Got it.
It also means consulting with an experienced immigration lawyer who can review your application and identify any potential issues.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it as getting a professional second opinion.
Makes sense. So if you're confident in your application and you want to get ahead of potential backlogs, filing sooner could be advantageous.
Yeah.
But what about those people who might have, let's say, some complications in their past?
Mm-hmm.
Does rushing still make sense for them?
That's where things get even trickier. And that leads us to what I think is the most significant potential change, the good moral character requirement.
Oh, okay. This is the big one.
Yeah.
And it's not just about being a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a legal term with a lot of nuances.
Precisely. Yeah. Legally, applicants need to demonstrate good moral character for a specific period, typically 5 years, before applying for citizenship.
Oh.
This involves proving you haven't committed any crimes, you've been paying your taxes, you're fulfilling child support obligations, if applicable, basically demonstrating that you've been a law-abiding and responsible resident.
So far, so good seems reasonable.
Right.
But our source mentioned that the definition of bad moral character actually got a lot broader the last time they tried to change things up.
Yeah.
And there was one specific example that just made me stop and say, wait, really?
You're probably thinking about the change of address form.
Yes. Not filing a change of address form. Can that really count against someone's moral character? That seems incredibly strict.
It does seem a bit extreme, but the rationale behind it is to prevent fraud.
Okay.
And ensure that applicants can be reliably contacted by immigration authorities.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, they're looking for any indication that you might be trying to avoid contact or game the system.
So something as simple as forgetting to update your address could derail your entire citizenship application.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure, and it raises questions about fairness, too,
Right.
Whether the system is striking the right balance between security concerns and practicality.
Mm-hmm.
People move, they forget things, life happens.
Yeah.
But in the eyes of immigration law, those oversights can have serious consequences.
So we've got potential changes to the citizenship test, longer processing times, and now this incredibly strict interpretation of good moral character.
Yeah.
It feels like everything is pointing toward waiting things out. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it's better to just hit pause and see how things shake out before even thinking about applying.
Yeah, it's tempting to think that way, especially when faced with so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
But our source, the immigration lawyer, actually advises against delaying,
Oh, really?
at least for those with very strong, squeaky, clean applications.
Really, even with the risk of all these changes happening, like right as your application is being reviewed, that seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be safer to wait and see what the new rules are before jumping in?
It might seem that way.
Yeah.
But there's a strategic advantage to applying sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Remember the clean slate idea we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
By applying now, before any potential policy shifts are officially announced or implemented,
Okay.
you have a better chance of being evaluated under the existing criteria, which could be more lenient.
So it's like getting your foot in the door before it slams shut.
Exactly. You're essentially locking in your application under the current rules.
Okay.
Even if new, stricter policies are implemented, they might not be retroactively applied to applications that are already in the system.
Interesting.
Think of it as beating the deadline.
Okay, I'm starting to see the logic here. But let's say you're listening to this and you're thinking, hold on. I might have something in my past that could raise a red flag under these stricter background checks.
Right.
Is there any hope for those individuals? Should they just give up on the idea of applying?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
But it's in these situations where professional guidance becomes absolutely essential.
Okay.
An experienced immigration lawyer can help you assess your individual situation, identify potential vulnerabilities, and develop a tailored strategy to mitigate those risks. They can advise you on the best course of action, whether that's addressing those potential issues head-on or waiting for a more favorable time to apply.
So in those cases, it's not just about filing as soon as possible. It's about filing strategically and with expert support.
Yes.
This is serious stuff.
It is, and it underscores the importance of seeking professional advice early in the process, rather than waiting until you're already facing challenges or denials.
This deep dive is really highlighting just how complex and nuanced this whole naturalization process can be.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as filling out some forms and passing a test.
You're absolutely right. And with these potential changes looming, understanding the intricacies of the process is more crucial than ever.
Speaking of intricacies, our source mentioned something at the very end that I want to circle back to: marriage-based immigration.
Okay.
We've been focusing on the general naturalization process.
Right.
But how do these potential changes impact those who are seeking citizenship through marriage to a U.S. citizen?
That's an excellent question. And it's important to remember that marriage-based immigration has its own set of rules and requirements and potential challenges. And any changes to broader immigration policy are likely to have a ripple effect on this process as well.
So even if you're married to a U.S. citizen, these potential changes are still relevant and something to be aware of.
Absolutely. For example, the stricter background checks we discussed earlier could be even more rigorous for marriage-based applications. There's often heightened scrutiny to ensure the legitimacy of the marriage and rule out any potential fraud.
Wow. So it's not a free pass, so to speak, just because you're married to a U.S. citizen?
Not at all. It's still a complex legal process that requires careful navigation, especially in light of these potential changes.
This is a lot to take in.
I know it is.
I imagine our listeners who are going through this process or even just thinking about it are feeling a mix of emotions right now. Maybe excitement, anxiety, a little bit of overwhelm. What would you say to those listeners? What's the most important takeaway from our deep dive today?
I would say don't panic, but don't be complacent either.
Okay.
The key is to stay informed, to do your research, and if you're seriously considering applying for U.S. citizenship, consult with an experienced immigration lawyer.
Yeah.
They can provide personalized guidance, help you understand your options, and navigate the complexities of the system.
Makes sense.
Remember, knowledge is power, especially when dealing with something as important as your immigration journey.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground. The potential changes to the citizenship test the possibility of longer processing times, the surprising ways good moral character can be scrutinized, and even the impact on marriage-based immigration. It's clear that navigating this process requires more than just a basic understanding of the rules.
It does, and unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball to predict exactly what will happen, but we do have expert insights and analysis to guide us. And those insights strongly suggest that staying informed and seeking professional advice are more crucial now than ever before.
Well said. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question. So our source, the immigration lawyer, mentioned that these potential changes to the naturalization process are just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Right.
Immigration policy is so vast and complex, and there are countless other areas where these seemingly minor rules or regulations can have huge impacts on the people's lives.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. We often focus on the headlines, the big policy announcements, but it's often the finer details, the seemingly insignificant clauses tucked away in legislation that have the most profound impact on our day-to-day lives.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, who knew that something as simple as a change of address form could hold so much weight in the naturalization process?
I know.
It makes you wonder what other hidden hurdles are out there, not just in immigration law,
Right.
but just in other areas of our lives.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything and how seemingly isolated rules can have ripple effects that we might not even anticipate.
Yeah, and that's why staying informed and asking questions and being proactive is so important.
Absolutely.
So even if you're not personally affected by these potential immigration policy changes, the takeaway here is that knowledge is power.
Yes.
We need to pay attention, dig a little deeper, and not just take things at face value.
I wholeheartedly agree. We need to cultivate a sense of curiosity and critical thinking, not just about immigration policy, but about all the systems and structures that shape our world.
Well said. It's been an incredibly insightful deep dive today. We've covered so much ground, from potential changes to the citizenship test and processing times, to the surprising intricacies of the good moral character requirement, and even the impact on marriage-based immigration.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure unpacking all of this with you. I always enjoy our conversations.
Likewise, and a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into potential U.S. immigration policy changes. Remember, staying informed is key to navigating a changing world. Until next time, keep those deep diving minds engaged.